From Strasbourg to Brussels and all over Europe, this is the EU Decoded podcast by the EPP Group in the European Parliament, in which we unpack European policy and current events.
Today we are looking at a conflict that has become one of the worst humanitarian disasters of our time, yet remains largely overlooked, the war in Sudan. Since April 2023, Sudan has been torn apart by fighting between the Sudanese armed forces and the Rapid Support Forces. Darfur, a region already scarred by genocide 2 decades ago, is seeing now new massacres. What is happening? Why is the world not paying attention? And what comes next? To answer to all this, I welcome in studio the members of the European Parliament, Reinhold Lopatka, head of the Austrian Delegation of the EPP Group in the European Parliament and chair of the Delegation for Relations with the Arab Peninsula, Mrs. Ingeborg Ter Laak from Netherlands, Vice Chair of the Delegation to the Africa-EU Parliamentary Assembly, and Lukas Mandl, also from Austria, the negotiator for the resolution on Sudan, which will be voted in the European Parliament. Furthermore, we have recordings from people from Sudan, from Mr. Salih Mahmoud Osman, who also won the Sakharov Prize in 2007, Mr. Mohamed Moustafa El-Nour, human rights lawyer, and Ms Salwa Elsadik, a Sudanese women's rights activist. Let's start by listening to Mr. Mohamed Moustafa El-Nour, human rights lawyer.
In short, it's a war on civilians, so every single citizen has been affected by this war, and I would really encourage the EU to step in, because the EU has a good reputation in Sudan. It's a neutral, wise body that has no direct interest in the war in Sudan, like other countries who are now mediating between the two warring parties. I would like to see more humanitarian aid, even though the warring parties do not agree on a ceasefire, but still delivering the humanitarian assistance, even during the war, is essential, and it is one of basic human rights based on the international humanitarian law. So I would like to see the EU taking more role and stepping to help the Sudanese people.
Was this conflict inevitable, or could it have been prevented, Mrs. Ter Laak? What do you think?
Oh, that's difficult to say, you know. Conflicts, it's something humans do among each other. I think every conflict can be prevented in the right time. And I wish there was never war, of course.
Mr. Lopatka.
A good question. An answer is not easy. Some years ago, we thought with the split and forming a new country, a new state, there is a chance to solve this conflict. Now we have seen that the opposite is the reality. It's one of the worst humanitarian catastrophes we see now. More than 25 million people, can you imagine 25 million people, are suffering. And until now, regional powers were more focused on the war than to find a solution to stop this war.
Mr. Mandl?
Of course, I can only confirm what Reinhold Lopatka already has stated. And I can add that also the solution for this conflict, and it's the largest conflict on earth, and it has been the largest one since 2023, and it comes along with a lot of cruelty.
Mrs. Ter Laak, do regional powers like Egypt, the Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia play a part in prolonging this war?
Well, unfortunately or fortunately, Sudan is very rich on raw materials, and yes, they are taken by the country because other countries need them. We also need them, and people trade in them. Yes, the war is being prolonged, or even fueling by the foreign actors in Sudan, unfortunately. So I think it's important to have a peace process, which just started with the Quad, with all the actors involved. So the Quad, of course, but also Egypt, but also neighbouring Chad, who's taking in lots of refugees. But it's also important for Europe to be there.
Mr. Lopatka, what's your opinion?
For me, for the first time, with this Quad, these regional powers, together with the United States, which is very important, having the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and the United States. The fourth partner is Egypt, but they are not involved in that conflict like others, that they work for a peace solution. When Mohammed bin Salman visited President Trump, he was asking President Trump to be more involved. And President Trump sees himself as peace angel. So immediately he reacted in a positive way. And this should also be the focus of the European Union to get involved. Because you have here, when I speak of military supply, Libya, you have Iran, you have Turkey, you have Egypt, you have the United Arab Emirates. They provide one of the two parties who are fighting here with military equipment, especially with drones. And you have here these two strong opponents. On the one side, you have the official government, and on the other side, you have this parallel government of RSF. And the worst thing was that they were able to get such a lot of weapons.
Mr. Mandl?
I think also the solution lies in the region, meaning that I appreciate the efforts of the so-called Quad, meaning Egypt, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and also the US, which is not in the region, but a facilitating power. I appreciate these efforts to achieve a ceasefire, and I think the European Union should politically join these efforts in order to make proper dwelling in dignity happen for people. This is what we wish for everybody, and especially for the people affected by this terrible crisis. Actually, we are faced with an actor we already know from many different crises, conflicts, even attacks, and from aggression of all kinds. That's the Muslim Brotherhood. That's also a very harmful player and harmful actor in this area and in this region within this conflict. So we have to broaden the horizon, see the holistic picture, and act, I would say, jointly with the so-called Quad in their efforts to resolve this crisis.
Mr. Laak, we hear about famine warnings. How close is Sudan to a full-scale famine and a full-scale collapse? What can we do about it? But before listening to your answers, let's listen to Mrs. Salwa Elsadik, a Sudanese women's rights activist.
Actually, as I said, the women are leading the response in Sudan. The women-led organization as frontliners, they are doing a lot in the community. So psychosocial support, community kitchen, helping, supporting pregnant women, taking the kids, trying to do the social cohesion and trying to hold the nation together. This is what they are doing. So I would say, as women-led organization, we need support like long-term funding, and at this moment we need capacity building, because the multi-displacement make many turnover in the staff and working virtually, but there is no strong infrastructure to hold everything. So direct funding, long-term funding to the women-led organization and let them do the job.
I think it's very dire, the situation in Sudan at the moment. If you see the numbers from the United Nations, it's enormous. It's beyond imagination, because they say it's over 21 million, and some estimation are even 28 million people who are having hunger at a daily basis. I'm from the Netherlands. In the Netherlands, there are living 18 million people. So it's more than the total population of the Netherlands who are on a daily basis starving. So yes, it's a very dire situation, and we need to step in and come across with humanitarian aid soon and at a very large scale.
You both mentioned the huge dimension of the humanitarian crisis, and also, as far as I know, is the biggest displacement of population in the modern history. But what do you think, despite this the big scale of this crisis, Sudan receives far less attention than Ukraine or Gaza? Why do you think the international response is so weak? Mr. Lopatka.
Ukraine is Europe, and we have a special relationship with Israel. Coming from Austria, it is our obligation to be focused what is ongoing in this region. Israel is the only democracy. There you had terrorist attacks. Ukraine was attacked by Russia. And here you have a civil war. You have on the one side here Sudanese armed forces. On the other side you have here this paramilitary rapid support forces. It's an internal conflict. And years ago, when I was with a former Austrian defense minister, Fasselabend, in the region, as I mentioned before, we found a way to solve it. I think it's the youngest state in Africa, South Sudan. But it was a big mistake. It's not solved at all. But as Lukas Mandl mentioned it, with the Quad, with the involvement of President Trump and the United States, they have the strength also to put pressure on these Sudanese armed forces, because the rapid support forces, they agreed now to work with Quad. But the official government, until today, they said they are not ready to do it. They accused the Quad that they are biased, I think, which is not true. And the European Union now has to do everything to support the Quad, to stop this mass killing. And when we talk here, we have the debate ongoing now in the European Parliament. We put our focus also on this spot.
Mr. Mandl, you have the same opinion. Don't you perhaps afraid that if the situation goes on, that Europe has to face again migratory pressure from all these refugees?
The migration crisis is one of the reasons why we have to care for the issue as much as we can. To resolve the crisis is important for the people on site, of course, in the first place. But secondly, of course, it's also in the interest of us, the Europeans, to avoid future migration crisis. We know where illegal migration leads to destabilization in the regions where people come from and also within Europe. And even worse, we have integration challenges in Europe at a large scale, so we have to tackle what's already there. So thanks for raising also this side effect, which can become the main effect for the Europeans if we don't resolve the crisis. And to the other question you have mentioned, I agree with what has been said by Reinhold Lopatka, and I can only add, in terms of scale, the so-called Gaza crisis was much smaller than this one. Each human life matters, and that's absolutely given, but also the nature of the crisis, besides the scale, was different because the Israeli Defense Forces were in battle with terrorism, pure terrorism, and this terrorism is not yet fully gone. It's still threatening us also within Europe, even in our home country. Reinhold Lopatka's and mine in Austria, a cell of Hamas has been found a few weeks ago. So this terrorism is still around, and we have to distinguish the different natures of different crises on this planet. Again, I emphasize each human life is worth the same, but the crises are of different natures.
Mrs. Ter Laak.
I think Sudan deserves all the attention, and I think it's little in the media because there are only few journalists present there, and I have no access to the area. So only after the SRF soldiers were starting to film their own atrocities, it came out, and then we put it on our agenda. We saw it on our tellies, and I think it's horrific to watch it, but it's important we see it. So if people know what's going on, we can step in. And yes, this war deserves our attention and needs to be high on our agenda.
Given the current dynamics, what do you see? Are we heading toward a partition, regime collapse, victory for one side, or an endless war, Mrs. Ter Laak? What's your opinion?
I hope not. I hope not for the people of Sudan that this is going to be an endless war. The war and the fight, they need to stop. The sexual violence against women, it needs to stop. Aid needs to come in and people need to have a living again in Sudan. So let's hope it will all stop and all parties will come to the table and negotiate. I think it's important that we, as EU, step at the table. The Quad has already started the process. I think it's important the EU steps in. Also, the African Union needs to be at the table, the Arab League. All partners need to be at the table, and the peace process should be transparent and clear to all parties. And we, in the West, have to know that expensive, crucial raw materials we buy, where we buy them from. And they're usually hidden in other products we buy, like cell phones or televisions. What the EU can do more is use their diplomatic force. At the moment, we are, due to the withdrawal of US aid, we are the biggest donors in the area right now. So we have a right to say we want to be part of this diplomatic solution. We have a right to say to the foreign interferences in Sudan, come to the table, Egypt, Turkey, Russia, also the United Emirates. We need to sit at the table and stop.
Let's also listen to the opinion of Mr. Salih Mahmoud Osman, who also won the Sakharov Prize in 2007.
EU should consider the question of how to stop the war. EU can reconsider its positions regarding how to explore ways to address this issue of the war. Number two, it is about also no peace without justice. EU should consider the issue of fighting impunity, because perpetrators who have been identified by the ICC 20 years ago are still at large. They are beyond the reach of justice. That is Omar al-Bashir and the rest. That is number two area. Number three, it is also about the humanitarian access. And that depends also if there is peace, entry points can be accessible and so on.
Thank you all for helping us give voice to a conflict the world too often ignores. A big thank also to our listeners for joining us in this discussion on the situation on Sudan and the EU strategy. And please, don't forget Sudan.
And that's it for this episode of EU Decoded. Make sure to follow the EPP Group on social media, stay informed, stay engaged, and join us next time as we unpack other EU topics.